Hey, hello there, family and friends. Welcome to another wonderful opportunity to experience the Word of God just a little bit at a time, a day at a time. We are excited to be here on this day, the ninth day of January 2026, and we are in for a treat as we are going to experience the Proverbs number 9. Proverbs number 9. Hey, I don't want to belabor the time. I want us to dig right on into this. And I just had one question when I was just preparing and thinking about this here. And I just wanted to understand a little bit more about Proverbs. Is Proverbs, is it written in the chapters? Like how we think about Matthew and Mark, Matthew chapter 9, or how we think about Genesis chapter 1. Um, but I don't think we really see that with Proverbs. But they were not written even with these breakdowns, with these verse numbers and all these things as we have them today. Chapters and numbers were added much later to help us, the readers, the teachers, and to help us with references. And also, in its original form, Proverbs was a collection of individual proverbs, sayings, poems, and instructions. They were grouped by themes and source rather than in chronological order. So as we get into this here today and read, so to speak, Proverb 9, we are reading a carefully arranged unit of wisdom sayings, not a chapter in the modern sense of a continual narrative. So, and I've been at times I make sure to, removing, this ninth chapter, but just dealing with Proverbs 9. Proverbs is more like a wisdom anthology than a timeline driven book. And so when we began to look at this, the original audience, they were young men in Israel, especially those people that was preparing for life. They was preparing for adulthood, they was preparing for leadership, and they were preparing for household responsibilities. They were students in the royal and in family instruction settings. There were sons being trained by fathers, elders, and even teachers. But there was also a secondary audience as it deals with families and households. It begins to deal with community leaders, with judges and rulers. Ultimately, all of God's people seeking to live wisely under the covenant. Why does these things matter? Well, it mattered to Israel because they were called to be distinct from surrounding nations. This wisdom instruction helped shape moral character, communal order, and faithfulness unto God. So Proverbs was meant to form lifelong habits and not just be a source of information. And Proverbs, they were not something that was written at one single moment, but it was compiled over centuries of time. They had, even in the book itself, it has multiple contributors, such as one being Solomon, who is the primary source for many of the sayings. They have other wise men and teachers and later scribes who preserved and organized these sayings, as we will see later on when we read Proverbs 25. They had a purpose of this being compiled in such a manner and way. It was to preserve what was proven wisdom that has been passed down through generation. It was to gather sayings that has stood the test of the times. It was to provide a training manual for living wisely in changing seasons. This was no strict chronological book. It is unlike historical books. Proverbs is not concerned about this happening and then here is what happened next. Its main concern is what is always true about life under God. And so Proverb is a timeless book of wisdom collected over time, and but not a timeline frozen in history. Proverbs is timeless wisdom collected over time, not a timeline frozen in history. Oral traditions. Oral traditions, we see some of these things. Hold on, first of all, I want to say, dealing with this, how was oral tradition and modern written culture, how these are two, they sit two parallels. Before I even begin dealing with that, I'm just always reminded when I was a teenager, oh, I make sure my wife ain't nowhere around. I had all the numbers. And I used to have them all up in my brain. I remember everybody's number and knew how to dial them out and all those sorts of things. But now, all of a sudden, since the invention of the modern cell phone, I don't know nobody's number. I know my wife's number. I know my sister's number. I know my church number. But there's not too many other ones I know outside of that. I know my number. But it just goes to show that sometimes things have shifted where our memory has been impacted. In the previous generations and the times of these of the book of Proverbs, there was no computer. There was no floppy disk, if you're old enough to remember that. There was no thumb drive. There was no cloud, no iCloud. There was none of those things. And so how was tradition preserved? They was preserved orally. Wisdom was spoken. Wisdom was memorized, and wisdom was repeated. So the Proverbs, they help out because they were short, they were rhythmic, and they parallel in structure. We lose some of it as we look at it in our English language, but if we was to learn how to embrace the biblical Hebrew language and read the book of the book of Proverbs, it will be so stunning and beautiful. But it also, this oral tradition, it was designed to be easily remembered so that it can be easily passed down. It was learning, it was revealing that learning was relational. Parents to children, elders to youth. And hold on, when we think and begin to think about that, how much they have shifted now. Our modern learning is where information is written down, it is digitalized, and it is consumed quickly. Emphasis is often on knowledge accumulation, not character formation. If we have less of the memorization and more references. Why does this matter? Well, because Proverbs was meant to be internalized and not just read. That's interesting because someone asked me, "Are you still doing the Proverbs this year, even though you've done them years before?" Yes, I have, and I'm still am going to do them because there is so much. First of all, this is the living Word of God, and me and my wife, we were just having a conversation about how every year when I do read it, it does something. I'm seeing things I didn't see before, and it's giving me a way. And to this year definitely has been hidden and helping some places in my life. And so it's to be internalized and not just read. Why? Because wisdom had to live in the heart because life decisions came up fast, and the goal was instinctive. Was was to have the instinctive godly response and not delayed consultation. And so before we do our overview of Proverbs number 9, let's go ahead and read Proverbs number 9. We're going to be reading this today according to the English Standard Version, also known as the ESV. And it is comprised, it is not a long reading, it is like 18 verses. Yes, 18 verses. So this will be a very quick read, so to speak. But I want you to listen to learn, not listen to accomplish. Here it is. It says, the way, or should I say, excuse me, Proverbs 9, the English Standard Version. It says, wisdom has built her house. She has hewn her 7 pillars. She has slaughtered her beasts and she has mixed her wine. She has also set her table. She has sent out her young women to call from the highest places in the town. Whoever is simple, let him turn in here. To him who lacks sense, she says, come, eat of my bread and drink of the wine I have mixed. Leave your simple ways and live, and walk in the way of insight. Whoever corrects a scoffer gets himself, whoever corrects a scoffer gets himself abuse. Mm. And he who reproves a wicked man incurs injury. Do not reprove a scoffer, or he will hate you. Reprove a wise man, and he will love you. Give instruction to a wise man, and he will be still wiser. Teach a righteous man, and he will increase in learning. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the Holy One is insight. For by me your days will be multiplied, and years will be added to your life. If you are wise for yourself. If you scoff, you alone will bear it. The woman folly is loud. She is seductive and knows nothing. She sits at the door of her house. She takes a seat on the highest places of the town, calling to those who pass by, who are going straight on their way. Whoever is simple, let him turn in here. And to him who lacks sense, she says, stolen water is sweet, and bread eaten in secret is pleasant. But he does not know that the dead are there, that her guests are in the depths of Sheol. That concludes our reading of Proverbs number 9. We read it in its entirety. Tomorrow we'll be reading from Proverbs 10, and it goes back to about a normal length, which is 32 verses. But before I do let you go, let's just look at these two things, because we have two invitations and one clear choice. And if I could say it like this, the big idea of Proverbs 9, it serves as the climactic conclusion to the opening section of Proverbs, chapter 1 through 9, or Proverbs 1 through 9. It presents a final contrast between wisdom and folly. Each is personified as a woman inviting people to her house. Here it is in structure. Excuse me. First of all, we see the wisdom's instruction in verses 1 through 6. Look, as we read through 1 through 6, we see how wisdom prepares a feast and invite the simple to gain understanding. It describes her house as one that is stable and well built. When we see this, it symbolizes security and life. Accepting wisdom requires us leaving foolishness behind. Right. And then in verses 7 through 12, we hear a warning about correction. The wise welcome corrections, fools reject it. The fear of the Lord is reaffirmed as the foundation of wisdom, and wisdom benefits the learner. Folly harms the rejecter. Finally, in the final verses 13 through 18, folly's counterfeit invitation. Folly imitates wisdom, but often stolen pleasures. Her invitation is loud, it is seductive, and it is deceptive. Her house leads to death, even though at first sight it seems appealing. And when we think about these things today, we still live between competing voices, wisdom and folly. Both promise fulfillment, but only one is able to deliver. Choices are not neutral. They shape not only our direction, but shape our destiny. And here's our key takeaway from Proverbs 9. Each day, we are responding to an invitation where wisdom leads to life, or the invitation where folly leads to wisdom. Which invitation will you respond to today? And how are you responding to the invitations that is before you? Well, this concludes our reading for today. Now may God bless you and may God keep you. That is my humble prayer.